The salty wind whipped across Naval Station Norfolk, tangling in the hair of anyone who dared stand on the pier. Lieutenant Kara, Raven Morgan, stepped off the transport, boots sinking slightly into the damp sand, leaving dark prints that the tide would soon claim. Around her, the world of the Navy SEALs sprawled like a fortress. Steel hangars, rows of sleek amphibious vehicles, and men whose sheer presence seemed to bend the air itself. They laughed easily, the sound sharp and arrogant, bouncing off the walls of steel like a warning echo. Each one was broad-shouldered, muscles defined, eyes honed to a predatory focus. Kara's light frame looked almost fragile in comparison, but she walked forward with deliberate precision, her posture a quiet defiance. The men watched her approach. One, a burly veteran with a scar tracing down his jaw, scoffed. "You're here for training." His voice was laced with amusement, dripping with the kind of disbelief only experience can breed. Around him, the others snickered, shoulders shaking, fists thumping in mock intimidation. Kara paused a step away, the wind tugging at her jacket, and tilted her chin. "Mind if I give it a try?" Her voice was calm, almost understated, but there was a razor-sharp edge to it, a quiet storm hidden beneath the surface. For a moment there was silence, as if the universe had paused to process the audacity of her words. Then the laughter erupted, sudden and chaotic, echoing across the training grounds. She barely flinched, eyes scanning each face with a surgeon's precision, noting the slight twitch of their eyes, the set of their jaws, the predictable patterns of intimidation. To them she was a girl in boots, a lightweight, a newcomer daring to enter a world that had swallowed men whole. Kara's hand brushed against the edge of a crate as she stepped closer, fingers curling like a coiled spring. The crate was old, scarred with the marks of previous training exercises, and for her it was more than wood and nails. It was a reminder of every impossible challenge she had faced before, every barrier she had shattered, every record she had quietly broken. She felt the vibration of her own heartbeat, steady yet insistent, matching the rhythm of the rolling waves behind the base. "Cute," another SEAL muttered, a shorter man with arms like tree trunks. "You think you can hang with us?" His tone was a mixture of mockery and a subtle challenge, testing the waters to see if she would flinch. Kara didn't answer immediately. Instead, she let her eyes drift over the obstacle course in the distance, towering walls slick with dew, ropes that hung like serpents in the morning sun, mud pits that had swallowed more than one ego, and the familiar scent of salt and sweat. It all spoke to her in a language she knew by heart. The group of SEALs laughed again, louder this time, a chorus of disbelief. One of them stepped closer, cracking his knuckles casually, a predator sizing up prey. Kara met his gaze with unflinching intensity. "You'll see," she said softly, almost to herself, and yet it carried weight, invisible but undeniable. It wasn't arrogance, it was certainty, the kind of certainty forged in fire, in trials that the casual observer could never imagine. She glanced around the perimeter, noting the instructors and observers watching with restrained interest. Their eyes were sharper, analytical, measuring not her frame but her potential. They had seen rookies stumble, crumble, and vanish under pressure. Kara, however, was a storm barely contained. Every movement was deliberate, a footstep, a tilt of her head, the subtle adjustment of her gloves. She exuded control, the kind that comes not from size or strength, but from knowing the limits of both oneself and one's environment. The SEALs resumed their jeering, tossing sarcastic remarks with ease. "You better hope you don't break a nail climbing that wall," one said with a chuckle. Another added, "or drown in that puddle over there." Kara's lips curved into the faintest of smiles, almost imperceptible, and she didn't speak. Instead, she closed her eyes for a fraction of a second, grounding herself, feeling the grit under her boots, the cool mist in her lungs, the steady beat of her heart sinking with the rhythm of the waves. It was a small ritual, almost invisible to the others, but to her, it was the ignition of something far larger than the mocking laughter surrounding her. She opened her eyes, calm, sharp, and deliberate. "All right," she said, voice steady. "Let's see how far this goes." The men exchanged confused glances, some stepping back instinctively, others narrowing their eyes. There was a tension in the air now, subtle but potent, like the moment before a storm strikes. Even the instructors stiffened, sensing the shift, feeling the ripple of challenge she carried in her quiet frame. Kara moved toward the first obstacle, a wall that had defeated countless rookies, a wall that demanded strength, precision, and unyielding nerve. She paused briefly at its base, fingertips brushing the damp surface, feeling the texture, mapping the angles, anticipating the friction and the force needed. The SEALs crowded near, some leaning casually, some subtly sizing her up, waiting for her to falter. Then, without a word, Kara leapt. The crowd instinctively stepped back as she launched herself upward with a grace that belied her size. Fingers hooked the edge, muscles contracting in perfect synchronization, her body rising with a controlled ferocity. A grunt escaped her lips, not of exertion but focus, a sound that resonated like the heartbeat of someone who had trained beyond limits, who had faced fear and worn it like armor. The SEALs watched, jaws tightening, disbelief washing over their faces. This was no ordinary rookie. This was someone who seemed to anticipate gravity itself, who defied expectation with every movement. As Kara reached the top of the wall and dropped to the ground on the other side, a plume of dust rising like smoke from a battlefield, the air shifted. Silence fell, broken only by the distant roar of the Atlantic. Even the burly veteran with the scar across his jaw muttered under his breath, voice tight with disbelief. "Who? What is she?" Kara straightened, chest heaving slightly, but eyes still blazing with that same quiet storm. Around her, the SEALs exchanged glances, unease flickering in their eyes. The laughter of a few moments ago was gone, replaced by the tension of curiosity and the shadow of doubt. They had underestimated her, and now, for the first time, they knew she might be capable of far more than any of them had imagined. Suspense hook. The SEALs had laughed, mocked, and dismissed her, but as she wiped the sweat from her brow and prepared for the next challenge, a storm was forming. The question hung in the salty air. Could a single outsider truly match, or even surpass, the legends of the Navy SEALs? Kara's next move would shock them all, and the base had no idea the record-breaking storm that was about to hit. The morning fog clung to the obstacle course like a ghost, swirling around steel frames, slick ropes, and mud pits that had broken more than one man before. The air was heavy with salt and anticipation, carrying the faint smell of sweat and metal. Kara Raven Morgan stepped to the starting line, eyes scanning every inch of the sprawling challenge before her. Towers loomed overhead, ropes hung like serpents in the mist, and walls rose like unyielding cliffs. Each obstacle was a silent judge, daring her to fail. Around her, the SEALs flexed and preened, cracking jokes that sounded hollow even to their own ears. "Hope you brought a snack," one of them said, voice dripping with derision. "You're going to need it." Kara's lips curved into the faintest smile. She didn't reply. Her silence carried a weight no words could match. She let her eyes trace the course, noting the angles, the possible grips, the pitfalls, and the sections where mud and water would slow even the most seasoned veteran. Every obstacle was a puzzle, and she was already solving it in her mind. The whistle blew, sharp and commanding. Chaos erupted. SEALs charged forward like predators unleashed, bodies flying over walls, swinging from ropes, and diving through mud with a primal ferocity. Kara remained at the edge for a heartbeat, observing, letting the current of panic and adrenaline rush around her. Then she stepped forward. The first wall rose like a jagged monolith. SEALs approached with brute force, heaving themselves up with raw strength. Kara's approach was different, calculated, precise. Fingers found the smallest holds, knees bent to absorb the recoil of the climb, body swinging in rhythm with the wall itself. Her muscles coiled and uncoiled, each movement choreographed with effortless efficiency. A grunt escaped her lips, but it was a sound of focus, not struggle. Below, the SEALs noticed the difference. They had never seen someone move like this, not a rookie, not anyone. One of them, a towering man nicknamed Hawk, frowned. "She's fast, too fast." He muttered it under his breath, almost afraid someone would hear. Kara reached the top and vaulted down with the grace of a cat landing on wet sand. Mud splashed, droplets flying like 1,000 tiny missiles, and the seals instinctively flinched. She didn't pause. Her eyes flicked to the next challenge, a rope swing spanning a 20-foot gap over a pit filled with icy water and jagged rocks. The first seal lunged, swinging recklessly, almost losing his grip. Kara approached, eyes steady. She calculated her momentum, shifted her weight, and launched herself. Time seemed to stretch for a moment. Her body hung in perfect balance, ropes creaking under tension, mud flinging from the drop. Then she landed on the other side, knees bent, barely making a sound, water spraying in a perfect arc. Whispers ran through the seals. Some tried to conceal their awe, others could not. "No way," muttered one. Another shook his head, eyes wide. Next was the mud crawl, a pit that had claimed pride and strength alike. Seals grunted and groaned as they waded through thick sludge, muscles straining against suctioning mud. Kara slid in with a fluidity that seemed impossible. Her hands moved like she was swimming, elbows slicing through resistance, feet finding purchase where none seemed to exist. She emerged, coated in muck but unbroken. Her eyes scanned the course ahead, alert and unflinching. As she sprinted toward the next wall, a group of seals trailed her, grunting in frustration. One, red-faced and panting, tried to block her path. "You don't belong here," he hissed. Kara sidestepped him with a dancer's precision, leaving him stumbling into the mud. The tension hung heavy in the air, not just between her and the men, but in the way the course itself seemed to respond to her. It was as though the obstacles recognized something exceptional. By the time she approached the final segment, fatigue should have been her enemy. Her lungs should have burned. Her muscles should have trembled. Yet Kara moved with a predator's grace, rhythm flowing from one movement to the next. The seals were scattered, some ahead, some behind, but none moved with the precision she displayed. The final challenge was a climbing wall, a vertical expanse of slick metal with minimal holds, crowned by a rope dangling to a platform above. The seals hesitated, muscles straining, faces pale. Kara approached with measured steps. She wrapped her fingers around the first hold, the slick metal biting her skin. With a fluid motion, she climbed, body swinging in perfect arcs, legs finding leverage where none existed, hands gripping holds invisible to the untrained eye. Below, silence fell over the men. Even the instructors had stopped barking orders, watching with tense fascination as Kara ascended. She was not just completing the obstacle, she was redefining it, turning what had been a wall of humiliation for so many into a stage for her skill. The platform loomed closer and a seal finally broke the silence. How is she doing that?" His voice was shaky, laced with disbelief. Another shook his head. "She's unreal." Kara's hand reached the rope. She grasped it and swung herself onto the platform, landing silently, chest heaving but eyes calm, calculating. She stood tall, mud streaking her face, droplets glinting like armor under the rising sun. Around her, the seals exchanged glances, uncertainty and respect battling with embarrassment and disbelief. The burly veteran with the scar across his jaw who had first mocked her stepped closer, voice tight. You didn't just climb that. You. Words failed him. The air was thick with tension, the kind that preceded a storm. Kara looked out over the course, every obstacle behind her a conquered challenge, every doubter forced into a silent reckoning. She didn't smile triumphantly. There was no need. The performance spoke for itself. Yet in that moment of stillness, a new awareness swept through her. This was only the beginning. The course had been a test of skill, speed, and strength, but the real trials awaited, tests of endurance, strategy, and unbreakable will. The seals might have laughed at her arrival, but they were about to witness something far beyond their expectations. And Kara, for the first time, allowed herself a spark of anticipation, a thrill at the challenge ahead, knowing the real gauntlet had yet to begin. Suspense hook. The seals had seen her conquer the impossible obstacle course, but the water trials, endurance tests, and life-or-death drills were next. Could she survive what no one else had survived, Or would even her skill falter when the stakes became deadly serious? The answer hung in the mist, waiting to strike. The Atlantic stretched out like an endless sheet of liquid steel, waves crashing against the pier with relentless fury. A cold mist rolled in from the horizon, stinging skin and chilling bones. The seals were already in the water, diving into the icy depths with practiced ease, their movements sharp, deliberate, deadly. Kara Raven Morgan stood at the edge, toes skimming the wet wood, muscles coiled, heart hammering, not from fear but anticipation. "Think you can keep up?" one of the seals shouted, smirking through chattering teeth. His voice was meant to intimidate, but it barely registered. Kara's calm gaze swept over the churning water, assessing, calculating, already imagining the path through the underwater obstacles. The whistle blew, sharp and urgent. Men plunged into the waves, vanishing beneath the icy surface. Kara took a deep breath, letting the salt sting her nostrils, then leaped. The cold hit her like 1,000 knives, numbing her arms and legs in an instant, yet she didn't flinch. She pushed forward, slicing through the water with fluid strokes, eyes scanning the submerged course. Ropes, weighted targets, submerged wall, they were all part of a deadly puzzle designed to test limits. Her lungs burned quickly, each second underwater an exercise in mental fortitude. She had trained for this. Countless hours had been spent holding her breath, visualizing movement, mastering control over panic. Every kick, every pull of her arms was precise, calculated, almost effortless. She glided beneath the surface, weaving through obstacles that would have ensnared the unprepared. Above her, the seals surfaced and watched, disbelief etching their features. None could match her rhythm, her speed, her focus. Some splashed clumsily, frustrated by their own exhaustion, while Kara moved with an almost unnatural grace, her body cutting through the cold ocean like a blade through silk. She reached the first submerged wall, gripping it with practiced fingers, muscles coiling to propel herself upward. The water fought her, but her movements were harmonious, calculated, each exertion purposeful. Emerging from the wall with a spray of icy droplets, she shot forward, diving under the next barrier, lungfuls of air carefully timed, movements precise. A seal near the edge of the course muttered under his breath, almost involuntarily, She's unreal." Others glanced at him, eyes wide, unsure if they should acknowledge it aloud. The confidence that had accompanied their mockery when she arrived had been replaced with tense scrutiny, awe, and a flicker of fear. The next obstacle was a submerged maze of bars and ropes. Seals twisted, fought, and groaned as they attempted to maneuver through, muscles straining against the pull of water. Kara slipped in silently, body flowing through the maze with the ease of someone who had memorized every inch. Her fingers found grips others couldn't see. Her feet kicked with precision, avoiding tangles that had trapped men twice her size. Midway through, she felt the burn in her lungs, the icy tendrils creeping into her extremities, threatening to steal control. But Kara thrived in the edge of discomfort, drawing strength from every second that others would have surrendered to. Her mind was razor-sharp, calculating air consumption, the angle of her body, the next obstacle before it even appeared. Emerging from the water for the final stretch, she lunged for the rope swing. The seals had struggled here, some crashing into the pier, some barely making it across. Kara wrapped her fingers around the rope, testing the weight, the swing. She launched herself, arms and legs synchronized, gravity bending to her will. Time seemed to stretch as she flew, water spraying like a frozen curtain behind her, until she landed flawlessly on the slick platform. Even the instructors were silent now, watching as she rose, chest heaving, eyes sharp. The seals, once brash and mocking, were pale, jaws tight, unable to hide the shock coursing through their veins. A veteran whispered, "She's not human." Another muttered, "I don't know if I've ever seen anyone move like that." Kara didn't celebrate, didn't pause to bask in the astonishment around her. She scanned the next segment of the course, the ice-cold, fast-moving current leading to submerged targets. She could feel the tension in the men around her, the unspoken question hanging in the mist. How can one person be this good? Diving in again, Kara fought against the relentless current, limbs burning with effort, lungs screaming for air. She maneuvered with surgical precision, grabbing weighted targets and moving them to the extraction point faster than any SEAL in the unit. Each move was exact, each motion calculated, leaving nothing to chance. Around her, men struggled, frustrated by their own limitations, casting wary glances at her effortless mastery. When she finally emerged from the water, she was dripping, shivering, and yet exuding a calm, controlled power that left everyone around her unsettled. The sun had begun to rise fully, casting gold across the frothy waves and illuminating Kara in a surreal halo. Mud and water streaked her face like war paint, eyes burning with intensity. She exhaled slowly, savoring the brief pause, but even in that moment, anticipation coursed through her veins. The commanding officer approached, eyes narrow, lips pressed into a thin line. "Lieutenant Morgan, impressive," he said, voice low and measured. The undercurrent of tension in his tone was unmistakable, pride and disbelief mixed into one. The SEALs whispered amongst themselves, some barely containing envy, others fighting the urge to laugh at the absurdity of it all. Kara looked out over the course, the wind tugging at her soaked jacket, salt water dripping from her hair. The laughter that had greeted her arrival was gone, replaced by a tense, electric silence. The men who had once mocked her now stared with a mixture of admiration and unease. She had done what no one expected. She had thrived where others had struggled. And yet, as she caught her breath, a cold realization settled in her chest. The course ahead was more grueling than any obstacle she had conquered so far. Endurance trials, mental tests, tactical simulations, they were coming. These SEALs had survived Hell Week, faced life-or-death scenarios, and pushed themselves to the brink. Kara had just proven she could survive the first trial, but could she endure what was next? Could her body, sharp and precise though it was, hold up against the relentless demands of a training program designed to crush the unprepared? She wiped water from her face and flexed her fingers, letting the cold sting remind her of reality. The men around her were no longer laughing. Their respect, or perhaps their apprehension, was palpable. Some avoided eye contact, others dared a glance, measuring her like a rival. For the first time, Kara felt the weight of expectation, not from herself but from everyone around her, silently daring her to fail. The final whistle blew for the water trial. The SEALs gathered at the edge, shivering, teeth chattering, muscles trembling from the cold and exertion. Kara stepped out, dripping and exhausted, but her gaze remained steady, unwavering. She knew the toughest trials weren't behind her, they were just beginning. Suspense hook. Kara had conquered the water trial, moving through freezing currents with skill no SEAL had ever seen. But the real endurance tests, mental challenges, and life-or-death drills were still waiting. Could she maintain her edge under the relentless assault of Hell Week, or would even her extraordinary talent meet its match? The tension hung thick in the misty morning air, promising that the next obstacle would push every limit, and possibly break everyone who dared challenge it. The sun climbed higher over the base, turning the air metallic and hot, a stark contrast to the icy Atlantic from just an hour before. The shooting range stretched before the SEALs, a long corridor of targets set at impossible distances, each one a challenge meant to break even the most precise marksman. The smell of gunpowder hung heavy, sharp in the nostrils, mingling with sweat and sea salt. Kara Raven Morgan stepped forward, her boots crunching over gravel, hands steady at her sides. Her heart pounded, but not with fear. It was exhilaration, that electric thrill of stepping into a challenge few dared face. Around her, the SEALs raised their weapons with casual confidence, fingers caressing triggers with the practiced ease of men who had been trained to kill in any environment. They were brash, cocky, and certain that no rookie, no matter how determined, could match their precision. A burly veteran muttered, "This should be fun," a smirk playing at the corners of his mouth. Another added, "Bet she misses the first shot." Kara loaded her weapon with deliberate care, the metallic click sounding louder than it should in the tense silence. She inhaled, the sharp tang of gunpowder filling her senses, her mind calculating distance, wind, trajectory, and gravity in an instant. The first target appeared, a simple shape at a distance most men would scoff at. She aimed, sight aligned perfectly, and fired. The shot rang out, echoing across the range, striking dead center. The SEALs froze, eyebrows raising in disbelief. One grunted, muttering under his breath, "That can't be real." But Kara didn't pause. Another target appeared, farther and smaller. Her breathing remained steady as she adjusted her aim, accounting for the subtle gusts of wind twisting across the open range. Another shot, dead center. The SEALs exchanged uneasy glances, the previous confidence in their smirks faltering. The targets kept coming, shapes moving erratically, some hidden partially behind obstacles. The SEALs followed, some missing shots, some hitting near misses, all grunting in frustration. Kara moved with a rhythm that was almost hypnotic, each shot precise, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. Bullets tore through the air, striking their marks with a terrifying inevitability. The men around her couldn't believe it. They had been trained for years, and here was someone, a newcomer, outmatching them effortlessly. One of the instructors stepped forward, voice low, attempting to mask his astonishment. "Lieutenant Morgan, remarkable." Kara didn't flinch. She continued, muscles coiled, eyes scanning, calculating each next move before the target even appeared. Her movements were almost balletic, elegant but lethal, a deadly dance across the range. The SEALs began to whisper amongst themselves, the disbelief palpable. She's a machine," muttered one. Another shook his head, tone a mixture of awe and fear. "I've never seen anyone do that, not in my life." Even Hawk, the towering veteran who had once mocked her, clenched his jaw, eyes narrowing with a mixture of envy and grudging respect. Then came the final challenge, a moving target spinning at unpredictable angles, distance nearly beyond most shooters' reach. The SEALs leaned into their stances, grips tight, eyes locked. Kara stepped forward, taking a deep breath, fingers steady. The world seemed to narrow around her, wind fatting, the hum of bullets, the chatter of men, the roar of the ocean, all fatting into nothing. All that remained was the target and her. The first shot went through the center, the second, dead center again, and the third, as if guided by instinct, struck perfectly. The range went silent, broken only by the distant crashing of waves and the occasional intake of breath from the watching SEALs. Even the instructors' mouths hung slightly open. Kara didn't move. Her chest heaved slightly, but her gaze was unbroken, unwavering, steady as steel. She lowered her weapon with a subtle grace, fingers flexing, eyes sweeping over the men who had once mocked her. The tension was palpable, disbelief mingled with respect, curiosity, and a creeping unease. The men were silent, some avoiding eye contact, some studying her as if she were an alien phenomenon. Finally, Hawk, red-faced, stepped forward, muttering through clenched teeth. How are you doing that?" Kara's lips curved faintly. "Practice," she said simply, almost dismissively, though her eyes held a spark of fire that suggested far more than mere routine. But the test wasn't over. Next came the tactical drill, hostages, obstacles, and chaos meant to simulate real-world combat situations. SEALs exchanged glances, some visibly tense. This was where raw skill met strategy, where precision alone could not save them. Kara's heart raced, not with fear but with anticipation. Every fiber of her being tingled with readiness. The scenario began. Explosions roared, deafening and disorienting. Smoke filled the air, stinging eyes and choking lungs. Shouts of command and panic blended into an indistinguishable roar. The SEALs surged forward, following protocol, reacting to the chaos with practiced efficiency. Kara stepped back, eyes scanning, analyzing, anticipating. Targets moved, hostages screamed, obstacles shifted. Most would have panicked. Kara thrived. She moved with a predator's instinct, neutralizing threats with surgical precision, guiding hostages to safety, predicting the chaos before it erupted. SEALs froze, watching her, jaws tight, unable to hide their astonishment. A commanding officer barked, "Lieutenant Morgan, status report." She responded crisply, voice calm and precise. "All hostages secured. Threats neutralized. Situation under control. The SEALs around her exchanged shocked glances. Their unit, designed for the elite, had been outmaneuvered by a single newcomer. Even the veteran instructors, hardened by years of teaching the best, looked at her with a mixture of disbelief and awe. Whispers ran through the ranks. She's unreal, impossible. Yet Kara didn't pause. She assessed the remaining obstacles, recalculating, preparing for the next move. Sweat dripped down her face, mingling with mud and salt water from earlier trials. Her breath came in controlled bursts, body taut with effort and focus. Every muscle was engaged, yet nothing seemed wasted. It was precision in motion, a lethal blend of physical skill and mental acuity. The drill ended, but the tension lingered. SEALs stood around her, some in stunned silence, some muttering under their breath, some unable to comprehend what they had witnessed. The commanding officer approached, voice low, measured, carrying both disbelief and reluctant respect. "Lieutenant Morgan, exceptional. I've seen very few perform at that level ever. Most would have failed long before this point." Kara nodded, calm, composed, yet a spark of anticipation burned behind her eyes. She knew this was just the beginning. The challenges ahead, Hell Week, endurance trials, and the record-breaking gauntlet would push her further than anything she had faced. But in this moment, she stood proven, undeniable, and unstoppable. Suspense hook. Kara had shattered expectations, dominated the range, and outmaneuvered elite SEALs in chaos. But the most grueling trials were still ahead. Could her extraordinary skill survive the relentless physical and mental torment of Hell Week, or would even she be pushed to the breaking point? The tension hung in the humid air, every eye on the base watching, waiting for the storm to come. The sun had long vanished, leaving the training grounds bathed in a cold, unforgiving moonlight. The SEALs called it Hell Week for a reason, a brutal crucible of endurance, pain, and mental fortitude designed to strip recruits down to their rawest selves. Mud pits that sucked the strength from even the sturdiest soldiers, walls that seemed taller with each repetition, and icy water that robbed men of both heat and hope stretched out across the base. Exhaustion wasn't an option. It was a constant, biting presence that clung to skin and spirit alike. Kara Raven Morgan emerged from the shadows, eyes sharp, muscles coiled like a predator poised to strike. She had faced water trials and obstacle courses, tactical drills and marksmanship challenges, but this was different. Hell Week didn't just test skill. It tested will, endurance, and the unbreakable ability to push forward when the body screamed to stop. Around her, the SEALs grunted, splashing through mud pits, crawling under barbed wire, struggling against exhaustion and the bitter cold. The whistle blew, piercing the night like a predator's cry. Men surged forward, faces contorted in effort and frustration. Kara followed, eyes scanning, body moving with a fluid precision that defied the chaos around her. She slipped through the mud like a shadow, hands gripping the wire, knees bending to absorb impact, muscles flexing with controlled force. Around her, seasoned SEALs groaned, some staggering, others biting back curses as exhaustion tugged at their very core. Every obstacle was a battle. Walls that had challenged men twice her size seemed insignificant beneath her calculated strength. She scaled, swung, and vaulted with a rhythm that left observers breathless, the air around her crackling with tension. A veteran SEAL, grunting and panting beside her, muttered, "I don't know if I've ever seen anyone move like that." Kara didn't answer. She didn't need to. Each movement spoke louder than any words could, a silent declaration of skill and determination. The cold mud clung to her, heavy and relentless, yet she pressed on. Waterlogged boots pulled at her legs, barbed wire scraped her skin, but she moved through it all with a predator's focus. Every step, every grip, every breath was a calculated act of survival and dominance. The SEALs were struggling, muttering under their breaths, watching her with a mixture of disbelief and growing respect. The laughter that had greeted her arrival had long since vanished, replaced by tense observation, silent challenges, and the unspoken question, how is she still moving like this? As hours stretched into the early morning, fatigue became a living, breathing entity, tugging at muscle and mind alike. Some seals collapsed into the mud, gasping for air, faces pale with the toll of relentless exertion. Kara's body burned, lungs screamed, and her limbs quivered. But she didn't stop. Each obstacle was conquered with precision, each motion executed with skill honed by years of rigorous training. She became a force of nature, unstoppable, relentless, a whirlwind of strength and focus. The instructors watched closely, noting the shift in the men's attitudes. Kara had not just survived, she had dominated. Seals who had once sneered at her were now exhausted, humbled, even intimidated. One muttered under his breath, voice thick with disbelief, "She's unreal." Another shook his head, eyes wide. "I've never seen anything like it." Even Hawk, the towering veteran who had mocked her arrival, clenched his jaw, shoulders tense, unable to hide the flicker of respect in his eyes. The next challenge approached. The infamous Ice Gold River crossing, a stretch that had claimed pride, strength, and sometimes sanity from many recruits. Water roared against rocks, the current strong enough to pull a man under. Seals hesitated, muscles trembling, teeth chattering. Kara didn't pause. She leaped in, letting the river embrace her, fingers gripping submerged rocks, legs propelling her forward with unstoppable force. The water bit into her skin, numbing her. Yet she pressed on, calculated, precise, moving as if the current itself obeyed her. Above the river, instructors and exhausted seals watched in tense silence. Some muttered incredulously, others exchanged glances, unable to hide the awe in their expressions. Kara emerged, soaked and shivering, but her eyes remained sharp, unwavering. The exhaustion that gripped everyone else seemed only to fuel her, sharpening focus rather than diminishing it. The gauntlet continued. Relentless runs, rope climbs, obstacle after obstacle, each designed to push men to their absolute limits. Kara moved like a shadow, each stride purposeful, each maneuver executed with effortless precision. She helped struggling seals when necessary, lending a steadying hand without breaking her rhythm, earning both surprise and grudging respect. Men who had doubted her at arrival now whispered among themselves, some too tired to speak aloud, others unable to process her relentless performance. Pain was constant, a companion at every step. Her body screamed, muscles burned, lungs gasped, but Kara drew strength from deeper reserves, unrelenting reserves that few had ever accessed. She became a storm, unstoppable, her focus razor-sharp. Every obstacle she conquered was another testament to her skill, her endurance, and the fierce, unyielding fire that burned within. Hours stretched into a blur of movement and suffering, but Kara remained. She pushed through walls of exhaustion, through mud and water, through ice and barbed wire. Each breath, each motion, each push forward left the seals behind, bewildered, struggling against forces that no human should withstand. The commanding officer observed from a distance, nodding the disbelief and admiration etched into every face. Kara had become legend in motion, a force that challenged every expectation and shattered every doubt. Finally, the last obstacle loomed, a towering wall of slick steel, higher than any previous challenge, dripping with mud and water. Seals hesitated, some trembling, unsure if they could even attempt it. Kara approached, chest heaving, legs trembling, yet eyes sharp, mind focused. Fingers found purchase, muscles coiled, and with a controlled surge, she began the climb. The wind howled, the mud slicked her hands, but she moved with impossible precision, body swinging, adjusting, gripping, and rising with unstoppable force. Reaching the top, she paused for only a heartbeat, surveying the exhausted, awestruck seals below. Every face reflected disbelief, respect, and unspoken acknowledgement. They had underestimated her, and now they had witnessed something extraordinary. Kara's chest heaved, arms shaking, yet her gaze remained steady, a predator's fire burning in her eyes. Suspense hook. Hell Week was supposed to break the best, to crush spirits and forge legends, but Kara had not just survived. She had dominated, outlasting men who had once mocked her, conquering obstacles that would have defeated them. Yet even as she stood victorious atop the final wall, a new realization struck. The gauntlet was far from over. Greater challenges awaited, tests of skill, precision, and mental fortitude that could push even her limits. Could Kara continue to defy expectation, or would the relentless storm of SEAL training finally catch her unprepared? The night hung heavy with suspense, the answer yet unseen. The first light of dawn cut through the mist like a blade, revealing the training grounds transformed into a war zone of chaos. Smoke machines hissed, simulating explosions, while actors in hostile uniforms darted among debris, their cries echoing across the base. The SEALs were already positioned, eyes sharp, muscles tense, guns at the ready. Kara Raven Morgan stood at the edge, surveying the scenario like a general preparing to command an army. The water trial, obstacle course, and Hell Week had tested her body, but this was a battle for her mind, instincts, and tactical genius. A commanding officer barked orders, each syllable precise, urgent, filled with adrenaline. Objective: neutralize threats, secure hostages, extract with minimal casualties. You have 5 minutes. Move. The SEALs surged forward, bodies moving like trained predators, each executing drills drilled into their muscle memory. Kara waited, watching patterns emerge, calculating probability and anticipating chaos. The first explosion erupted, a deafening roar, smoke billowing, scattering debris. SEALs dove, rolled, and fired with fluid precision. Kara remained calm, letting instinct and training guide her. She moved like a shadow, silent and deliberate, stepping between threats, neutralizing them with efficiency that left no room for error. Hostages screamed. She adjusted, covering angles, predicting enemy movements before they happened. A SEAL tried to flank a hostile target, but the man fired back. Kara lunged, disarming the threat in one fluid motion, dragging the SEAL to safety. The veteran's eyes widened. Did she just? But there was no time for words. Another explosion roared, sending smoke and debris into the air. The battlefield became a blur of motion and chaos, yet Kara moved with surgical precision. Every decision, every reaction was perfect timing. The SEALs began to notice. Men who had mocked her at arrival were now struggling to match her pace, coordination, and foresight. One gritted his teeth, whispering, She's seeing things before they happen." Another shook his head, jaw tight, muscles trembling. Kara's calm presence unnerved even the toughest veterans. She was no longer just a participant, she was a force reshaping the battlefield. She reached a hostage pinned behind debris, enemy combatant approaching with weapon raised. Time slowed. Kara assessed, calculated trajectory, distance, and force. With a swift, controlled motion, she neutralized the threat, dragged the hostage to cover, and signaled another SEAL to advance. Her eyes flicked to the next threat, body coiled, ready for movement, anticipation brimming in every fiber. The SEALs whispered among themselves, disbelief thick in their voices. "She's not human," one muttered. Hawk, the towering veteran who had once mocked her, clenched his jaw, fists tight, eyes following her every move. The commanding officer watched in tense silence, impressed and wary. "Lieutenant Morgan, remarkable," he muttered, almost to himself. Drill intensified. Multiple hostiles, improvised obstacles, and exploding simulations challenged every limit. SEALs faltered, some retreating, some shouting, some struggling against the mental and physical pressure. Kara moved with a predator's instinct, weaving through chaos, neutralizing threats, guiding hostages, predicting enemy behavior, and improvising with fluid creativity. Her body was a weapon, her mind a chessboard where every move had been calculated before the threat even appeared. Halfway through the simulation, a hostage was separated, trapped behind a series of obstacles designed to slow extraction. SEALs hesitated, debating the best approach. Kara assessed instantly. Ignoring exhaustion, she darted forward, navigating the obstacles with speed and precision, neutralizing threats before they even registered the danger. The SEALs could only watch in awe as she reached the hostage, executed a flawless extraction maneuver, and returned the civilian to safety. The instructors exchanged glances, disbelief mingling with grudging admiration. This was not a typical trainee. Kara had taken a chaotic battlefield and orchestrated it with mastery. The SEALs' whispered disbelief turned into tense fascination. I can't believe it," one muttered. Another muttered, "She's rewriting the rule book." Kara's movements continued. a blur of fluid motion, razor-sharp instinct, and calculated precision. Explosions erupted around her, debris fell, hostiles attacked, but she remained a calm storm, unyielding, relentless, navigating chaos like a master strategist. Even seasoned SEALs found themselves struggling to anticipate the next move, forced into reactive positions against a rookie who had defied every expectation. As the drill neared its end, the final objective appeared. Multiple hostiles converging on hostages trapped at the far end of the simulated compound. The SEALs hesitated, assessing angles and risks. Kara's mind raced, calculating trajectories, movements, and timing. She charged forward, neutralizing threats with surgical efficiency, guiding hostages to cover with movements that left no room for error. The whistle blew. The drill ended. Silence hung heavy over the training ground, broken only by the distant roar of the ocean and the panting breaths of exhausted men. The SEALs gathered, faces pale, eyes wide, some unable to conceal awe. The commanding officer approached, voice low and deliberate. "Lieutenant Morgan, that was exceptional. You've surpassed every expectation and set a standard few have ever reached." Kara exhaled slowly, surveying the aftermath. The SEALs who had mocked her arrival now looked at her with a mixture of respect, disbelief, and a trace of fear. She had not only completed the drill, she had dominated it, redefined it, and made every veteran reevaluate what they thought possible. Even Hawk approached cautiously, stepping into the tension-filled silence. You've got skills," he admitted, voice tight. "Better than anyone I've seen." Kara simply nodded, eyes steady, letting the acknowledgement settle. She didn't gloat, she didn't need to. Her performance spoke for itself. But beneath the calm exterior, Kara felt the spark of anticipation ignite. Hell Week was still underway, and the record-breaking physical gauntlet loomed ahead. Her body was pushed, her mind sharpened, yet the most grueling challenges were waiting, the tests that separated legends from the rest of the pack. The SEALs, seasoned and hardened, had been humbled by her skill, but the ultimate test, the one that would push her to the edge of endurance, was about to begin. Suspense hook. Kara had outmaneuvered chaos, neutralized threats, and led with precision no SEAL could match. But the record-breaking gauntlet was next. Could she continue her relentless ascent, or would the next challenge finally push her beyond the limits of human endurance? Every eye at the base turned to the looming obstacle ahead, the answer hanging on the razor's edge of tension and anticipation. The sky had turned an unforgiving gray, clouds thick with the promise of rain, casting the training grounds into a shadowy battlefield. The final challenge loomed before Kara, Raven, Morgan, and the exhausted SEALs. The record-breaking gauntlet, a brutal sequence of obstacles designed to crush every ounce of strength, endurance, and willpower. Mud-choked trenches, towering walls slick with rain, rope swings over icy water, and weighted carries that would have felled seasoned veterans stretched across the base. Whispers ran among the men. No one finishes this without breaking something. Bones, spirit, or ego. Kara stepped to the starting line, boots caked in mud, arms trembling slightly from the relentless hours behind her. Her chest rose and fell in measured rhythm, muscles taut, eyes sharp, scanning the course with precise calculation. The SEALs glanced at each other nervously. Even those who had survived Hell Week looked worn, defeated, their previous confidence diminished. Kara's presence radiated a quiet power, her determination almost tangible in the misty morning air. A whistle pierced the tension. The gauntlet began. SEALs surged forward, splashing through mud pits, hauling weighted logs, grunting under the strain of exhaustion. Kara followed, body moving with a controlled intensity, each step precise, each motion deliberate. Her focus was unbroken. Fatigue was merely a whisper she refused to heed. The first obstacle was a mud trench lined with barbed wire, designed to slow, trap, humiliate. SEALs groaned, muscles straining, slipping in the muck. Kara plunged in, sliding under the wire with fluid grace, mud clinging but never hindering her rhythm. Emerging on the other side, she propelled herself forward, momentum carrying her with predator-like efficiency. Men struggled beside her, gasping, grunting, whispering disbelief. How can she keep going? Next came the wall climb. Towers of slick steel loomed overhead, dripping from the rain. Seals braced, arms shaking, teeth clenched. Kara approached with measured steps, gripping holds with fingers that felt immune to the slick metal. Muscles coiled and she surged upward, body swinging, adjusting, recalibrating with every movement. She reached the top in moments, landing silently, chest heaving, eyes scanning the course ahead. The men stared in awe, jaws tight, unable to hide their astonishment. Weighted carries awaited next, logs heavier than some seals could lift, to be transported through mud and water. Kara wrapped her arms around the first log, muscles straining, veins prominent, yet she moved with effortless power, strides long and precise. Around her, men struggled, some dropping their loads, others faltering under fatigue. Kara pressed on, dragging the weight with relentless determination, never faltering, never slowing. Then came the rope swings over icy water, a section that had broken many of the base's finest. Seals leaped, splashing into freezing currents, some clutching rope, some flailing. Kara approached, timing calculated, muscles coiled like springs. She launched herself across with perfect momentum, landing on the far platform without a single slip. Water sprayed behind her like frozen shards, yet she remained poised, every motion deliberate, every breath controlled. The rain began in earnest, cold and drenching, yet Kara barely registered it. Mud, water, fatigue, they were nothing compared to the focus burning in her chest, a fire forged from years of preparation, drive, and an unyielding refusal to fail. Seals around her struggled to keep pace, muscles screaming, lungs burning, yet Kara moved as if propelled by something beyond mere human endurance. Halfway through, the course introduced the final wall, a sheer vertical climb impossible for most. Men had tried, failed, retreated, and collapsed in defeat. Kara approached, mud dripping from her hair, arms trembling slightly but eyes unwavering. She assessed each hold, calculating force, distance, and timing. Fingers gripped, legs coiled, and with a controlled surge she began her ascent. The seals watched, jaws tight, disbelief etched into every face. Each upward movement was a battle. Rain made the steel slick, mud clung to every grip, and fatigue whispered for surrender. Yet Kara ignored it. Every breath, every muscle contraction, every movement was deliberate. She climbed as though gravity itself had bent to her will, reaching the top with a silent, explosive determination. Landing on the platform, she stood tall, chest heaving, soaked, mud-smeared, but triumphant. Below, the seals' whispers turned to murmurs of awe. She's going to break the record," one muttered. Another shook his head, tone tinged with disbelief and respect. Hawk, who had mocked her on arrival, now clenched his jaw, eyes following every motion, unable to hide the grudging admiration and fear burning behind his gaze. The final stretch was a brutal sprint across a rain-soaked obstacle field, weighted bags, mud pits, and rope climbs stacked in rapid succession. Seals faltered, some collapsing, others sliding helplessly in the mud. Kara surged forward, legs pumping, arms driving, chest heaving, lungs burning. Every ounce of her body was taxed beyond comprehension, yet she moved with fluid grace, precision, and unstoppable determination. The finish line came into view, a line that had broken countless men before her. She pushed harder, digging into every reserve of strength, every mental strategy, every memory of preparation. Around her, seals gasped, eyes wide, some falling behind, others forced into stunned silence. She surged across the final mud pit, hauled herself over the last obstacle, and slammed into the finish line with explosive force, chest heaving, mud and rain dripping, eyes blazing. Silence fell. The seals stared, some trembling, others pale, some unable to comprehend what they had just witnessed. Kara's gaze swept across them, calm yet fierce, letting the moment settle. The instructors measured time and performance, disbelief in their faces. She broke the record," one murmured, voice barely audible over the pounding rain. Another shook his head. "I've never seen anything like it. Never." Even Hawk, the veteran who had mocked her at the pier, stepped forward slowly, face tight with tension. You've got skills no one should have," he admitted, voice trembling between awe and reluctant respect. Kara nodded subtly, acknowledging the recognition without breaking her composure. She didn't need applause, her performance spoke volumes. But as the SEALs began to process the feat, a tension lingered in the air. Kara's performance had rewritten expectations, shattered assumptions, and set a new standard. Yet even she felt a spark of anticipation, knowing that the trials of this week were designed to break not just the body, but the mind, and she was far from done. Suspense hook. Kara had shattered the record-breaking gauntlet, leaving the SEALs in awe and disbelief. But the ultimate test awaited. Leadership, strategy, endurance, and raw skill would be challenged like never before. Could she maintain her unstoppable momentum and secure her place among legends? Or would the final, grueling trials finally test her limits? Every eye on the base now watched, waiting for the storm to either crown her or confront her with an unprecedented challenge. The sun broke over the horizon, scattering shards of gold across the drenched training grounds, illuminating the final challenge of Hell Week. The record-breaking gauntlet was conquered, obstacles mastered, yet the Navy SEAL instructors had one last test, the ultimate evaluation of mental acuity, leadership, and precision under extreme stress. Kara Raven Morgan stood at the edge of the compound, mud-smeared, soaked to the bone, and exhausted beyond measure. Every muscle ached, lungs burned, and yet her eyes burned brighter than ever. She knew the final trial would define whether she was merely a prodigy or a legend in the making. The commanding officer approached, voice steady but tinged with anticipation. "Lieutenant Morgan, this is the final scenario. Hostile compound, multiple targets, civilians trapped. You're in command. SEALs will follow your lead. Success depends on strategy, execution, and leadership. Fail and it's over." Kara nodded once, firm and silent. Around her, the SEALs men who had once doubted her stood tense, eyes flicking between her and the looming compound. Some whispered, some clenched jaws, all aware that the woman before them had already outperformed expectations at every level. She wasn't just skilled. She was a force that defied logic, a storm of focus and precision. A whistle cut through the morning air. Chaos erupted. Explosions simulated mortars, smoke churned like a living entity, and actors posing as hostiles darted through debris. Kara moved with absolute clarity, scanning, calculating, predicting. She barked orders, precise and concise, guiding the SEALs through the chaos like a conductor orchestrating a symphony of violence and rescue. Targets moved unpredictably, civilians screamed, and obstacles threatened to slow even the most elite operatives. But Kara anticipated. Each movement was calculated. Angles, timings, cover positions, tactical advantage. She neutralized threats with lethal efficiency, signaling her team to secure civilians while simultaneously coordinating suppression fire. Every SEAL around her was forced to respond, adapt, and follow her lead. Some were bewildered at her ability to simultaneously manage strategy and action in the chaos of simulated combat. The first hostage was trapped behind a barricade rigged with simulated explosives. SEALs froze. Kara assessed the situation, calculating angles, explosive trajectory, and timing. With a sudden surge, she led the approach, disarming threats, guiding the SEALs, and extracting the civilian safely. The instructor's eyes widened, notes abandoned. The men around her stared in disbelief. The second hostage was in a more complex position, surrounded by multiple hostiles. SEALs hesitated, debating angles and risk, but Kara's eyes flicked, assessing, predicting, acting. She moved swiftly, neutralizing threats before they could respond, positioning her team flawlessly, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. The hostage was secured. The SEALs were in stunned silence, comprehension struggling to keep pace with her rapid execution. Each subsequent stage escalated. Moving targets, timed obstacles, simultaneous threats, and high-stress tactical challenges. Kara orchestrated her team with remarkable authority and precision, guiding movements, anticipating enemy patterns, and adjusting plans mid-execution without hesitation. SEALs who had once mocked her now followed her instinctively, aware that her decisions were unerring. Some whispered in disbelief, She's leading us better than anyone I've seen." Hours of grueling, precise action passed in what felt like moments. Explosions, smoke, simulated gunfire, and chaos tested every ounce of her skill, endurance, and mental fortitude. Yet Kara moved with a predator's focus, every action deliberate, every motion exact. Her body burned, her lungs screamed, but her mind was sharper than ever. Exhaustion was irrelevant. She thrived in the crucible, commanding, executing, and adapting in ways that left even the veterans awestruck. Finally, the scenario reached its climax. Multiple hostiles converged on civilians in the center of the compound. SEALs hesitated, weapons raised, unsure of angles. Kara assessed instantly, running calculations in her mind in a fraction of a second. She directed movement, neutralized threats, coordinated extraction, and ensured zero casualties. Every SEAL followed her lead, awed by the clarity, precision, and confidence she exuded under unimaginable pressure. The whistle blew, silence fell, smoke cleared. Every SEAL stood panting, mud-smeared, exhausted but alive. Every hostage had been rescued, every threat neutralized. Kara stood at the center of the compound, soaked, filthy, muscles trembling from the exertion, yet her posture exuded unbroken strength and command. The commanding officer approached, walking slowly, taking in the scene. The SEALs around him were silent, eyes wide with disbelief. Finally, he stopped before Kara, voice steady but carrying awe. "Lieutenant Morgan, you have not only survived Hell Week, broken the record, and dominated every challenge, you have redefined what it means to lead. Exceptional skill, unmatched precision, and flawless command. You are extraordinary." The SEALs erupted in muted applause, some cheering, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others speechless. Hawk, the towering veteran who had first mocked her, approached cautiously. You're something else," he admitted, voice thick with respect and astonishment. Kara's eyes met his, a subtle nod acknowledging their journey from doubt to respect. She didn't smile, she didn't need to. Her actions had already spoken louder than words. For a long moment, the base was silent but for the heavy breathing of men who had been pushed to the edge. Every eye remained on Kara, the woman who had arrived as an unknown and now stood as a force beyond comprehension. Rumors of her performance would ripple through SEAL training history, whispered in awe, disbelief, and admiration. She had shattered barriers, dominated chaos, and outperformed every expectation. Kara exhaled, finally allowing herself a small, private moment of satisfaction. Sweat, mud, and exhaustion ran down her body, but in that moment she felt an unshakable truth. She had not just survived. She had conquered, led, and inspired. Every SEAL present, every instructor, every veteran who had doubted her witnessed something extraordinary, a performance that would be remembered, talked about, and studied for years. Yet even in victory, Kara's mind was already alert. She knew the world beyond the base would bring new challenges, but in this moment she allowed herself a spark of triumph. She had faced impossible odds, defied expectations, and emerged not just intact, but legendary. Final suspense and emotional hook. Kara Raven Morgan had arrived as an underestimated rookie, laughed at, doubted, and mocked. She had conquered obstacles that crushed the strongest men, dominated tactical drills, broken records, and led in ways that few could imagine. The SEALs had witnessed something beyond skill. They had witnessed the birth of a legend. And yet, as the sun rose higher, glinting off her mud-smeared face and piercing eyes, a subtle thought lingered in her mind. The world outside this base would not wait, would not bend to skill alone. The real battlefield was just beginning, and Kara was ready. The legend was confirmed, but the story was far from over.